Hey everybody, do you remember that video that I did last year on the Savage Core miniature game? Well, the rules are out! So after making that video last year and really enjoying looking at the Savage Core miniatures and talking to Steve Soleil, the sculptor for the miniatures and the game, I did actually get contacted recently by Joe over at Lucid Eye Publications about how he was going to send me the new rulebook. So today I'm actually going to show the new rulebook and take a look at it and talk about the game. For those of you that might just first be looking at this, if you're not familiar with the Savage Core game setting takes place in a vast cavernous space underneath the Atlantic Ocean. It's sort of an area where a number of different peoples have actually discovered it from different factions and are vying for it and laying claim to it, so to speak. So in the game there are actually 6 different factions currently. They include the Atlanteans, the Amazons, the Neanderthals, the Cro-Magnons, the Jaguar tribe, the Id, which is a soon-to-be seen faction that's not currently released. So, let's take a look at the game. Hey everybody, so here I have the Savage Core Rulebook. It's a rulebook that's just short of 90 pages long, and it is a color rulebook and really nicely produced. Just in case, this is not going to actually be go into depth about the rules of the game. If you're interested in actually seeing a bit of a walkthrough for the gameplay, this video right there is actually put out by Lucid Eye Publications, and you can actually click on the link in the description of this video, and that's the link there as well, to actually see a bit more of a detailed overview of the rules themselves and how the game will flow. But this is the book, and to play this game, you essentially need a 4x4 playing surface. You'll need a faction, at least for yourself, if you're playing against a friend, that in most cases will have 7 miniatures. There are some exceptions with some factions. You'll need a ruler, a tape measure in inches, 2 10-sided dice, per player, so not too bad actually in that regard. And then you'll need the occasional marker for when damage is on a boss where they have more than 1 wound, but nothing really too much as far as markers and things like that. That's really it. And then of course you'll need some terrain that for your board to make it as you like it for the game. Now really nicely produced here on the inside here. Actually, for those of you that actually watch the pulp sort of movies, then your eyesight like mine might not be the best, and so because we're getting older, and you'll notice that it's actually really nice print size. It's it's not like a really fine print book. So in a lot of ways, even though it's like 90 pages, just a little less than 90 pages, it actually is fairly good print size. So it's pretty easy to read, very easy reading, and really nice photography throughout the book. Like you can see some photography of the miniatures throughout the book, and then in the back of the book as well, you have maps, and then you have some actual photography of various photos of the setting from Lucid Eye Publications with their miniatures that are painted, which are really nice. And you'll see some of these pictures just throughout the book. So in this game, I'll just quickly just kind of talk a little bit about some of the mechanics. I've mentioned already the factions that are in the game, but what you actually have is a game that is built on phases, and so you will have phases in the game. You have your initiation phase, you have a bonus phase that can happen where you have a double trouble encounter. Double trouble encounters can range anything from like a T-Rex entering the board to like craters just kind of opening in the board and swallowing guys and that have to be avoided. They range anything from beasts to events that are happening, even sort of like a pivotal figure from the Savage Core may show up and then sort of do what they like to do for their I guess agenda on the table, and we'll see how that affects each faction. And so then after the double trouble phase, you also have the tricky customer phase. Now this is where your boss can actually use various what they call tricks, which are relics. They're categorized as relics, hero surges and mob scene, but they're basically sort of things that you can do to take advantage of your faction and your boss on that turn to get an edge in this scenario. Now, it's interesting because you do have to, and I haven't gotten to this point yet, but you do have to make a roll, you know, against a statistic of your boss in order to do that. And so it really adds a lot of flair to the game and, you know, in your choice of faction. So that's actually a really cool section that I'm looking forward to. Then you have your movement phase, and then you have a close and ranged conflict phase, and then you have the conflict results phase. Now, it's 5 phases. In my impression, though, is that some of these can go kind of quickly. Like, I do see this as a fast-paced game because, you know, in some sort of settings, like these two would be combined. But one of the things I really like, and I'll show it in a moment, is that your conflict results add a bit of flair to your narrative of the game, because even though, you know, your miniature may be hit, you still then have to roll to see what happens as a result of that hit. And it adds some randomness and some narrative generation into the game, which I think is very cool. And so that is basically the flow and the various different phases in the game. Talking about double trouble encounters, you know, like they show, they talk about an overview here, but there's a number of different ones. You know, like you actually have like a lost Nazi treasure hunter enter the board. You know, you can have one where it's a T-Rex, a seismic shift, sunstone, which I didn't talk about, but there are these iridescent valuable stones that are within the Savage Core that have an effect within the game, and one of the Double Trouble encounters utilizes that. An amber haze descending on the board, which affects your miniatures, sort of like a mystical haze. Ravenous beasts, which is different than the T-Rex, as well as magma overflow. Zachary, which is a character of the Savage Core gone native, and so you see this individual show up who's a character from the lore of Savage Core, and then a lost explorer sort of entering the board. So there's a lot of cool random events that can happen, which is really neat. And then another one called the Usurper Strike. So there's lots of different cool things. They talk, you know, talks about tricks and what they are, and this is just game description. The boss and the boss, which are the regular guys, and the boss goes into this in more detail now throughout the book. Each miniature does have statistics. It's not overwhelming, but I feel like it adds enough depth that you are still having 6 statistics per miniature, which really can add a bit of, you know, depth to the game as far as you know, the variety of factions and differences between them. So yeah, it looks really cool. We have a section on each of the I guess factions, which is very neat. And I do think after reading some of these is where a lot of the character of the game also comes within the factions and all the different relics and hero abilities that come out of each faction. And so, yeah, each one of the factions, except for the new one, the ID, is available in this book. The ID is not available yet, but will be available online at Lucid Eye Publications. One of the things that I think is very cool is that whether it be Double Trouble encounters, the factions, or the scenarios that I'm coming to, they're going to be expanding on this game at the Lucid Eye Publications website as well. So you have the book, but in some cases you'll be getting faction information directly from Lucid Eye Publications, as well as additional scenarios and potentially encounters as well. And so there's lots of room for expansion on this game. It seems to be a very nice, smooth, quick roleplay for a very neat pulp genre. I'm very much looking forward to it. And so here we go, scenarios. Right now, it actually has 4, 5 scenarios, and they've already talked about how they're actually adding more, and they're going to be adding more scenarios on the Lucid Eye Publications website. So yeah, that's just sort of a quick overview of the game. One thing didn't mention is like you have the close combat and range combat results tables, where it's kind of neat because in some cases like you can get hit but completely survive it. It's just sort of like a graze, and in some cases you know, your guy can just completely be dead or something in between, like and so yeah, so it adds some variety even in the mechanics. I think because you're talking about in some cases having just 7 miniatures on the table, the more flair and less like automatic death that you get, you know, and the more narrative generation, the better, in my opinion, in a game like this. And I think that they've done that in this sense. They've added the ability to have that narrative element and be able to escape death, you know, even when you're hit, and just have lots of random encounters, either due to mysterious objects or like beasts coming in and just various things. And so that's just sort of my quick first impression of the game. I'm really looking forward to exploring this game further. I hope you enjoyed that closer look at the rulebook. If you're interested in the miniatures or the game itself, you can see more at Lucid Eye Publications. And yeah, take a look at it. Please like, share, and subscribe, and take care.